What's up, everybody? My name is Artem, and this is Q&A number 3. Thank you guys for your questions, and let's start. The first question asked by Magda Rep. Thank you again for your question. And which one of the languages that you already know was the hardest to learn? Um, the answer is very simple. It was German. It is still German. It's been like 2 years and 3 months since I started learning German, and still I'm struggling with this language. I cannot say that I speak it fluently, but I am still focusing on this language. This is one of the languages that I learn right now. There are three languages at the moment that I'm learning, and why was it so difficult? Well, first of all, because my motivation was weak, very weak. I My initial motivation was just to learn an important language, because at the time I already spoke Italian, Spanish, French, and the next important European language, and English, of course. And the next most like useful and quote unquote important language was German. And yeah, I just started learning German with using the same strategy that I applied to my Spanish and French and Italian. Well, not Italian, because whenever you start a new language, like Italian, okay, it's almost from zero. I mean, you already know English, but like it's another Romance family, language family. So um, you start basically from scratch, and you have to figure out how the language works, all of the structures and the vocabulary. I mean, you have some vocabulary in English, but still the structure is pretty much different. Okay, once you learned Italian, which I did, I started learning French. It was a little bit tricky with pronunciation at the beginning, but the vocabulary and the structure was pretty much the same with some differences. And once you start learning Spanish, it's so easy. After learning Italian and French, it's so easy. And yeah, I learned Spanish in 6 months till like fluency, intermediate fluency. Um, yeah, and with this kind of mood, with this kind of like attitude that learning languages is so easy. We just listen to the podcast, and you talk to native speakers, and that's it. So I wasn't prepared to the difficulties of the German language, and yeah, I started with listening to the podcasts, to reading and translating, like ignoring the grammar and all of the important stuff, and that was detrimental for me because I was so demotivated because I couldn't see any result after months and months of practice, and my motivation was very weak. So yeah, and it's still the case. I mean, right now I can understand German. I can read in German, and I can understand both spoken and written language. But still, when it comes to speaking, I'm so unconfident, and I can't make a sentence correctly. I mean, the more or less big sentence. And this is the problem. So there are two factors that caused a lot of pain in my German. Was the lack of motivation, and the difficulty, and my wrong approach. Wrong approach, because you have to learn a little bit, at least a little bit, about the German grammar, and I just ignored it for so many years. So, well, 2 years, and yeah, right now I'm learning German with a tutor, and she's teaching me a little bit of grammar. And it's so funny that we she explains me everything in German, and I talk to her in German, but we learn something like alphabet or just some basic sentences. So there's a huge gap between like in my German. I mean, I can between my vocabulary in German and my grammar. So yeah, this is the hardest language. Still, I cannot say that Thai, because I'm also learning Thai. I cannot say that Thai is more difficult than German. But still, yeah, it taught me that, it taught me that whenever I teach somebody, I can understand the struggles of that person, because I know that you can learn a language for many years and not see any progress because of the wrong approach, or maybe because of the lack of motivation. So yeah, that was the hardest language for me. And since I already told you about the hardest language I ever had to learn, now I'm going to tell you about the easiest one. And the question was asked by Charlotte G. What is your favorite language, and what was the easiest language for you to learn? So let's start from the second question. The easiest language for me was definitely, absolutely sure about it, Brazilian Portuguese, because I already spoke three Romance languages. They were Italian, French, and Spanish. And I already, like from scratch, I could understand Brazilian Portuguese and basically Portuguese. But I decided to pick up Brazilian one because, yeah, it is more popular and I liked the sound of it more. So yeah, I decided to learn Brazilian Portuguese. Yeah, just out of curiosity, and there was a lot of YouTube videos in Portuguese. So yeah, I started learning this language in on March 2016. And the funny thing is that I started learning German on January 2016, and after learning Portuguese for 2 months, and after learning German for 5 months, I was much better at speaking Portuguese, because it is so similar to Spanish. It is so similar to, yeah, it has a lot of vocabulary from, uh, well, all Romance languages. And yeah, I just had to learn a couple of things here and there that are just different. Like, for example, the word for accent, like in all of the rest of Romance languages, I mean, Italian, Spanish, and French. I know there are more other Romance languages, but the main is accent, acento, acento. But in Portuguese, it's sotaque. And there are not a lot of things like this, but that was that was the problem for me. Um, and it was easy because it was so close. And I did two things to learn Brazilian Portuguese basically in 4 months. Well, first of all, I learned a little bit. I read a couple of articles on how to read in Brazilian Portuguese, and learned a little bit of grammar, because in my city, in Novosibirsk, there was no books for learning Portuguese, so I had to find something on the internet. And so that was the first thing. There were like three things. First, I was like learning the basics. The second thing was listening to a lot of authentic content, and there was a podcast that I recommend to anyone learning Brazilian Portuguese, which is called Café Brasil. It's so great. I mean, this is probably one of the best. This is definitely one of the best podcasts I ever had to listen to. It is just about the Brazilian culture, the problems and the solutions, and the stories of people. Yeah, so good. A lot of music there, so a lot of like positive energy, and yeah, I loved it. So I listen to it every day when I like walk to the bus station, and I listened to it. I would listen to it like for 30 minutes every day for 2 months, and that gave me a lot of. I just started to understand the Brazilian Portuguese, And in order to speak, I started speaking with Brazilians on a weekly basis. I used to speak to them like for like three times per week, and yeah, that was it. That's it. I After 2 months, by the way, if you go to my first video on this channel, you'll find me a video of me speaking Brazilian Portuguese after 2 months. It is far from being perfect, but I mean, I speak Portuguese for 5 minutes, and it's quite a result for 2 months. And yeah, after 4 months, I was pretty much confident, and after 7 months, I was fluent. I was fluent in Portuguese. So, and I really like this language because it was basically for free, and it is very nice language. I really enjoy how it sounds. And now we go to the first question, which is what is my favorite language? It always changes because, for example, when I first started learning Italian, that was my definitely was my favorite language. When I started learning French, it was my favorite language. Spanish, the same thing. Until I got to German, you know. But now, what I can say, I really love, as I just said, the sound of Brazilian Portuguese. I find, like, from the phonetical point of view, this is probably the most beautiful language. But if we count, like, if we consider all the factors, like the amount of positive emotions I had to experience with this language, it's probably Italian, because I traveled to Italy 2 times, and I have some friends that are Italian, who are Italian. And I listened to great podcasts, watched beautiful documentaries on Italian. So I love this language. It was actually the first language that I started learning on my own. So remember singing Celentano songs to my mom. Was so nice. The first experience of learning like a new language, and not being taught, not being like um, made to learn something, to do something, but it's just your will, it's just your desire to learn something new, to yeah, to get closer to this culture, and yeah, love Italian. But I also love French. It's a very beautiful language, and I also had some beautiful moments with this language. I used to work in a hostel, and there was a lot of French people. I talked to them in French. I was always complimented by my French. Thank you, French people. What else? Yeah, those are my top languages. So Italian, Brazilian Portuguese, and French. Spanish, I also like Spanish, but it's not that. I mean, I learned it for 6 months. Then um, there are a lot of It depends. It depends on what content you use. You can find the most like brutal language, and if you like the content presented in this language, you will love this language. This is the way I like describe my favorite or not favorite language. Yeah, this is basically my answer to you, Charlotte. Thank you for asking. And let's go to the next one. It's getting a little bit darker, but I'm gonna answer the final question for today. And the question was asked by Kern Fatima. Do you believe learning the writing of the language is just as crucial as knowing how to speak the language? Also, what is your eye color? Looks green. Any advice for someone who is learning Russian, both the writing and speech? Thanks. On a side note, guys, watching shows in another language helps a lot for both the accent and language itself. Thank you for the question, and um, I am going to. Well, it is obvious that you learn what you need. So if you wanna speak the language, you don't necessarily have to learn how to write it. But even though if you wanna speak, I think that is helpful for you to also learn how to write. Um, there is this service, this website called italki.com. And basically, what you can do is that you can write a short post and post it and see the corrections of a native speaker. It is completely for free, and it is not the ads of not advertising italki here, but it is what I used to improve my grammar, to fill up the gaps. So you write in like a text, you see the corrections, and you improve your output. Basically, you whenever you got the chance to speak, you're gonna remember those mistakes you made, and it's gonna be very beneficial for you. Also, it is way less stressful for you to write something, because whenever you have to speak fast, you have to speak clearly, you have to give the right words, you have to give the right structures, and you have to do it immediately. Uh, Whenever you write, you can take your time, you can look up the conjugation, look up the translation of the words you don't know, and it's very calm and, nice experience. So my answer would be yes, it is important. It is not crucial, it is not absolutely necessary, but if you do it, it's gonna help you. It's gonna make your speaking experience less stressful and more comfortable. So yeah, going to the next question. What is my eye color? I think it's brown. I don't know if they call it in English brown, but in Russian it would be карий. So yeah, it is brown. Next, any advice for someone who is learning Russian, both the writing and speech? Wow, this is probably the most unexpected, and I don't really know how to answer to this question. But what would I recommend? Basically, I think, well, there are cases and there are lots of just brutal things that you just have to learn. So I would recommend, of course, you have to listen a lot, speak a lot, but learn a little bit about grammar at the beginning. Just a little bit. It's gonna help you. I think it's the same with German. I didn't learn the cases, and I had no idea about this. I had no idea. So whenever I spoke, I didn't feel comfortable. So yeah, I wasn't confident speaking German. So if you want to be more confident, you should learn a little bit of grammar. But still, there's another approach to it. There's a polyglot, Lucas Bigetti, who is, I don't know why I pronounce it with Russian accent, but yeah, he is Portuguese. So well, he is Brazilian. So the pronunciation of Russian and Brazilian Portuguese is pretty much is very close. So yeah, he has learned for the whole year, for the first year, his strategy was just to speak Russian, to chat. Like the first half of the year, he was chatting with Russian people, translating, I don't know, in Google Translate and copy pasted, and this way he learned some patterns. And the last half of the year, he was speaking. He was speaking on Skype. And after all of that, he started learning grammar, because he says that if he would start learning the grammar from the very beginning, it would be so hard, so just too heavy for him, and he would just quit. So maybe you should consider this to practice first the language and learn the theory after all. But from my experience learning German, it is, I mean, you should find the golden middle, as we say it in Russian. Yeah, this is basically my answer. I don't know what to say to you concretely, because I've never had to learn Russian as a foreign language, but I understand that is wow, this is crazy language, and yeah. So good luck with your Russian. Yeah, and this is basically it for today. Thank you guys for watching Q&A number 3. I hope there's gonna be more and more Q&As in the future, and if you want it to continue, you can write down your questions, and yeah, I will see you in the next video.